Alrighty, welcome to Fintech Insider on air, episode number 13. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for joining last week. We had a bunch of people live and even more watching afterwards, so thank you for your support, everybody. Really appreciate that. If you haven't already checked out the previous episodes, please do so. Last week, David was joined by the co-founders of Homewards, and they had an awesome chat about why home buying is so difficult, and if you've gone through that experience, it sucks. And this week, well, I'm not David Breer. This is David Breer, but he's actually on a staycation for Easter at the moment. So I'm actually Simon Taylor, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by Lianna Brindad, who's the head of Yahoo Finance UK. Lianna, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks, apart from a bit of a cold.
Yes.
I'm not always just nasally, everyone.
You've been up to a lot lately, interviewing some very interesting people over at Yahoo.
Yeah, so we just launched a show, and it's all about these incredible women that are changing their industries and have incredible careers. And everyone's favourite was my first episode, which is Eileen Burbage, superstar VC.
Do check it out, people. Look out for Yahoo Finance UK. And of course, Adam Davies, head of delivery at 11FS. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Too bad. Before we actually got started there, Lianna was explaining a little bit about what's actually happening at the moment. And since we are going live, we are on air right now with Fintech Insider. What is actually happening with Brexit at this moment? Does anybody know?
Well, the TLDR is that it's Groundhog Day, still for the last few months. But what that means is that today there's an emergency summit in the EU where they have to vote on whether there's going to be an extension to Article 50, meaning that there's going to be a Brexit delay. Theresa May is pushing for a delay until June the 30th. Whereas Donald Tusk, who's the European Council chief, is trying to push for a Brextension for a year. And the reason for that is because any kind of extension, whether it's for a week, a month, or a year, has nothing to do with reopening talks. So anything that we talk about today is still going to be absolutely evergreen until Brexit happens, because the extension is actually there for Theresa May to try and get her deal through Parliament. So all that will mean is that whether we're going to have another month of her trying to get the deal that everyone keeps rejecting through, or a year of that. So more to come.
It's if nothing else, it's an interesting spectator sport. But there is just this general attitude in the UK of like, well, we just better get on with it. And speaking of getting on with it, then, so what does this actually mean for the financial services market in the UK, Adam? Like, have we seen, like, as you look at head of delivery for 11FS, have you seen less delivery needing to be done, or are we in a bit of a bubble because what we do is a little different?
Potentially, I think what we do, I think you need to take the silos of finance. So you need to look at capital markets versus retail banking versus asset management versus potentially insurance. And I think all of those have different, facets to it in terms of how they've been affected by Brexit. I think the obvious one is the issue around passporting and clients and whether they want to stay here or go abroad. Therefore, banks, investment banks typically, those who allocate finance, have had to therefore set up their own separate entities in the in Europe. And all of that has sort of has created this incredible industry where I think a lot of the different banks have sort of ploughed hundreds of millions of pounds into actually setting up new licensed entities in the European Union, taking a certain sort of stance on Brexit, be it hard or soft. Normally, I think they've gone for hard Brexit, but doing sort of an MLP version of that, as in what's going to just get you our version of MLP, MVP, but what gets you just over the line to the point where you've got something set up. And then they've kind of like waited, and they've waited for the customers to flood through. And of course now, sort of at the nth hour,
they're sort of delayed.
Yeah, they're like now talking about soft Brexits, and suddenly actually your sort of multi-million-pound strategy to set up, a new financing centre in the EU and to abide by new potential laws, passporting laws, whatever they manifest into post-Brexit, you can do, but you're kind of like now, well, where's my customers?
It's interesting, as I speak to folks in the cap markets world, it feels like the last 2 years for them has been figuring out their Brexit strategy, and now they're like sort of ready and waiting for it to happen. One of the big ones is, of course, the loss of euro clearing, which the UK was a major centre of, and we've seen that sort of fragment and split throughout Europe. But Frankfurt looks like it's a real potential winner. Dublin's a real potential winner. For other European capitals pulling financial services in, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Euroclearing is one of the biggest things. I mean, it's like 1 trillion a day, right, in terms of clearing. And it kind of makes sense that all these European cities are vying for that business, because you need a centre that is able to funnel through all the EU related clearing for financial services. And if London, with this amount of uncertainty, it needs to be elsewhere. There has been some of the government papers out, again, they're a bit loose and they don't give too much detail, but say that at least if a hard Brexit happened tomorrow, that there would at least be a couple of years where Euro clearing is protected and will be in London. But the thing is, ever since the Brexit vote happened, Frankfurt and Paris especially have been very much head-to-head in gaining that business, and a lot of influential European chiefs have actually come out and said, well, if Brexit happens, of course it's going to move. So the thing is, you've got that repercussions of how do financial services in whichever market try and prepare themselves for if there is that schism, because they need to do business. They need to be able to service all their existing clients, but also not spend, pretty much all of their, capital trying to prepare for this. So,
which I think is interesting, because as you say, for the retail banks, sort of serving a UK retail customer, it's kind of like, eh. But for the capital markets side, if you work in the institutional side, or even with corporates, or even on the small business side to a lesser extent, there's a whole bunch of stuff that starts to come up and get really interesting. Mm-hmm. But kind of moving away from that side and then into the fintechs who have been born in the UK, who are looking to expand internationally. The past 5-6 years has been, the fintech story has been very much about London, but increasingly the global competition for that, massively from the US. Australia's started to stand up. You see Singapore being interesting. China's really started to explode. Dublin has got a lot of activity. There's an awful lot of stuff happening in different countries now. Luxembourg, of course, is another. Amsterdam. You could go on. What does it mean for fintechs? Are you still going to want to found a business here, do you think?
Well, I think this is there's 2 points to this. It's not just the structural stuff, but also where's the investment coming in, especially if you're a startup. Where do people want to park their cash? And the problem with uncertainty, we're so used to uncertainty for the last 2-3 years that almost people are like, look, but we're still here and we're still growing, and look, all these companies are flourishing and it's still Brexit on the horizon. But it's more of it's been bleeding slowly when it comes to investment, rather than, it may be I know, death by 10,000 paper cuts, but there has been a slow bleed in terms of that. So if you are a fintech, and especially most fintechs, are startups and they're young and, are looking for rapid growth, they need that capital. And so even just looking at some stats on UK business investment has suffered its biggest fall in the last 3 years due to uncertainty. CBI has also been saying 80% of companies has hit investment, and they're the companies that will be investing in fintechs. And so on the flip side of things, if you are, especially Nordics are doing amazing on the fintech startup scene, they may think do I really want to set up shop in London? Maybe, if we want to hedge our bets, we'll just, start it in Oslo, because at least we know there with the Norway deal, or maybe if they go to Paris, they're not going to Brexit or Frexit or Grexit, anytime soon. So, for someone that wants to be, start off leaner and want to just get their product out and get a name, what's the first thing you do? Go somewhere where there's a bit more safety.
But
I was just going to say, I think there's more facets to this. So first of all, the amount of money that's come into tech companies over the last year is still double. £100 fund here, or it might be euro. They set up you just started that. They opened up an office last week. Mm-hmm. So I think there is room for.
How much genuinely, that's what I think.
Potentially. Well, I was going to make the point that I think it's still positive if you look at the figures. I think there are other factors to the UK which, if you add to Brexit uncertainty, might make this a less appealing market to invest in. So you're looking at things like saturation of products, customer acquisition at the moment for fintech, if you like, products and services is incredibly high across the population. But again, would saturation prospects actually lead to a lower customer acquisition rate for your product, etc., etc.? There are other factors at play than I think just Brexit is.
There was a survey a couple of years ago by the RFI group where they looked at sort of the G20 countries, and of the G20 countries, the appetite for digital adoption amongst all of the age groups in the country and in those 20 countries, the UK was number 2 behind China.
Yeah.
So there's something there about the pull from the consumer that's quite interesting. But is there something about sort of the dynamics of an ecosystem that once that freight train starts running, it's harder to slow it down? So you've got the investment sort of community, you've got a talent base, you've got a city where people like to live, and there's a high population base there. Like, is it sort of a case of something that's being held back from being its best self but still would continue to succeed? Or do you think there's a looming threat here that's more existential than that, for fintech specifically?
I think for fintech, timelines. So I think in the immediate term, I think people might still hold, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, investment is slowing down. But I think people will probably hold guard until 2021 arrives. So Brexit's happened. Then we're entering into new trade negotiations. That might therefore affect some of the regulations around monetary investment, capital investment, how easy it is to serve other countries from here, etc., etc. So I think the key year for me isn't necessarily now, and we probably won't see a whole heap of change in the next 6 months, assuming that we do leave on June the 30th, or and we don't have that year extension. But I do believe that it's the renegotiation of the bilateral trade deals that we do with other countries that might give people an idea of just how far they want to pitch this. Is it a 1-year play or is it a 5-year play?
But that's really intricate, like on the trade front. So there was 2 things. I mean, there's really good points there about the freight train analogy, because Eileen Burbridge said the other week that, even if, Brexit happened tomorrow, it's not like all of a sudden we're going to see no fintechs and all investment dries up and things like that. It wouldn't happen in the first year, probably wouldn't happen in the second year, but where it becomes the sticking point is actually in about 5 years' time. Where will we be at? Because that is the huge area that needs to be sorted. And when it comes to regulation, when it comes to trade deals, things like that, that's the real sticking point, because we would still have a transition period. That's the point with that. And one of the biggest points when it comes to after that transition period is like these bilateral trade deals. The problem is trade deals take about literally 6 to 10 years to remotely come into fruition, and within that time you've got that kind of vacuum of what used to happen, what we're trying to do, and what are we doing right now. And that will be a huge key point in history, future, or Back to the Future, my brain, whatever the time period is, where things could completely collapse. I mean, I am going a bit apocalyptic here.
I was just going to say though that freight train analogy, but then the momentum eventually slows off, and it's the things that you've got to look out and in front of that. Who's thinking that far ahead? And is it a case of during the recessions in the sort of 80s and 90s, we saw that the creative industries in the UK were sort of isolated from a lot of the recessions and continued to thrive and almost then became the green shoots of recovery. Is fintech one of those industries, or is it one whereby actually it's having its moment in the sun now and it would dip down the other way and come down the curve on the other side? Or are the incumbents the one that lose out and they lose on opportunity as people start to increasingly compete? Sort of, where do you think this impacts the competitive dynamic of the retail banking marketplace?
So that's a really good point, actually. So I mean, I would have said years ago that it wouldn't have been as detrimental for fintechs, because a lot of the time, even with barely any capital, it's the beauty of fintech, right? It's that it comes from scrappy grassroots in a way, doing amazing things with very, very little, and making an impact on even with like 2 people in a room, whatever product that is. However, where fintech is at the moment is that it has, and it's a good thing, a lot closer collaboration with the incumbents. It's getting a lot more intertwined, and in terms of whether it's the product, the services, the partnerships, the funding, things like that, it is becoming a lot more intertwined. I mean, I think David has said in like various interviews as well, just saying how, you know, it's fintech industry is growing up, like it's working a lot more with all these incumbents. However, if there was, I see that sometimes that if Brexit happened and we're talking about impact, then if it will definitely impact like the retail banks, the investment banks, and when you're that intertwined, if there was a push come to shove, I wonder, and obviously I don't have the answers, but I wondered where they'd scale back. Will they protect their own, to be honest, or would they go, right, so these things that we do have to invest in the next 5 years for not just profitability, but for projects to really come on board, or whether it's like blockchain initiatives, anything.
The marketing sort of disappears a little bit. Where will they?
Exactly, and will they go like, okay, maybe we'll just take this in-house? I mean, that's how a lot of traditional, you know, any corporates work.
I think it's an interesting observation, because you see the question on the one hand is it survival of the fittest, and the leanest, sort of more modern tech architecture, lower cost of operating digital banks could thrive if they're competing with the big banks, but the ones that are supplying and partnering, they find themselves in possibly a more vulnerable space. I think that's an interesting sort of separation.
Yeah, actually, it is a good point. So I think if you're looking at, I think at the end of this year, the end of 2019, going into 2020, I think a lot of banks, when they've set up these entities in Europe, they've still got sort of 2-3 year programs now to increase the amount of people that are over there and the capabilities and operations and all sorts of stuff. But you'll tend to, like in my mind, I think that, you know, fintech and financial technology and almost would follow institutional money. So again, I don't see this being sort of as we've talked about, an overnight cliff. But this is more of a long-term thing. So, you know, if the money moves, eventually institutional money moves, and it's easier to get funded in other countries, and the regulation catches up the UK, which has been one of the benefits of getting regulated here, that it's so comprehensive that you can basically, you know, transpose what you do here, not just across Europe, but across anywhere. That we get loads of organisations that come to us to be regulated here because it's the gold standard and it's the way that it's set. So what's really interesting is, you know, taking a punt into your point, like looking at forward thinking 1, 3, 5 to 10 years, how much of that money do we feel is actually going to move into the EU and beyond? And therefore, the connotations of that's incumbents' money that they loan out. And then the connotation of that is that fintechs, in theory, would have to flock there as well. Yeah. And I see that being the pull more than anything else.
It's an interesting point about the internationalisation of UK fintech. So you've got the English common law, you've got the English language, and then also the export of a lot of the work of the FCA. You see you know, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, you see Australia, you see lots of jurisdictions in the Middle East now looking to learn lessons from that. And actually, is the future of an outward-looking UK to take its success in fintech and actually do it somewhere else as a services business?
Look at open banking. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. So they've taken the OBIE, the implementation entity that's been really successful here, and they're literally picking up the structure and putting it into other jurisdictions, other geographies. It's not our only USP, of course, but it's one of our main USPs over the past 5 to 10 years, is our regulatory environment has been so strong, and it's encouraged new banks, it's encouraged fintechs. I think, 3 years ago, there were 20-something banks that went for license. I mean, it's amazing.
But coming on to regulation then, are we not going to lose that? Because if having a policy advantage is fantastic when other people want to copy it because you implemented it successfully. But as part of being able to implement that successfully, the fact that once you're regulated here in the UK, you had access to the European markets? Or was it actually, people would sort of build themselves in the UK and focus on the UK market?
So when I've been looking at this, because it is just a whole, web of confusion about what's going to happen about this. But if we break it down, the number one thing is that if there was a hard Brexit tomorrow, we'd still have the rules and all the gold standard stuff that we would have with the EU. But it's more about going forward, what is the monitoring oversight to keep that aligned? So whether it's, even if it's something like trade, like whether you're, it's going to be like with pharmaceuticals, things like that, it obviously has to adhere to the standard of what the EU would monitor it as, just as much as like if you were doing financial services or how something's regulated, that would still be there. But the biggest thing is that once that's imported here and the severance of ties happens, obviously the UK would have the ability in Parliament to go, I don't want that bit anymore out of it. I don't want that bit, and they can vote on that. It would take forever to do every single thing, so they won't, because it would just be impossible to vote on every single regulation, even within a month, 2 months, 3 months. It wouldn't happen. So it's unlikely that suddenly it's like, hey, it's free for all and we're deregulating everything and we're going away from the gold standard. I still think it's going to be there, but the problem is that it totally is up to our lawmakers, our politicians, who decide if they want to change something which would fundamentally de-unify the whole standard that was before.
And one might be cynical and say that their goal is to retain power and to get re-elected rather than to support its industry, unless of course that industry is helping them get re-elected through funding. So there's a question about whether or not they would support that in the interests of the financial services sector or the United Kingdom's economy, or in the interests of getting re-elected, which sort of explains a little bit of the infighting you see going on at the moment. There's never been a time where it's been easier to potentially grab power, but harder to see anybody that might emerge and take it.
Yeah, I don't want to go like Brexit negotiating bashing, but it is interesting that the deal that Theresa May has negotiated is very light on industry-specific information, especially regarding financial services. From obviously, it doesn't mention passporting or what might happen after. So it's if that's the kind of, just directionally, even from a strategic perspective, this is the kind of situation that we're in, that we just can't get a consensus. Can you imagine once you go to the lower levels and actually looking into the granular level detail, silo by silo, industry by industry, and can you imagine just how difficult that's going to be to sort itself out, and to your point, to sort of extrapolate bits and take bits out that you don't want or do want. Really
so on that,
on that point, really quickly, because it's really interesting. One of the favourites on your show that comes on, Oscar, Oscar Williams-Green, he actually went to this talk where this is the thing, I can't even remember the MP's name because he's really new, but he's just been like imported in. He was at a big fintech conference, and he actually talked mostly in the speech about how shocked he was to how no one in Parliament actually really understands technology, and especially fintech and financial services side, and explicitly said this. And this is someone's just been imported in, and so what have they been doing for 2-3 years? That's that understanding. So that's why all these documents that have come out are so loose on, scant on the details of how they would tackle things
because you don't have people who really understand the industry kind of making these rules. The lawmakers don't get the context of the laws they're making. It's quite frustrating. But when it comes to the point you were making a moment ago about kind of if a fintech were to come to you now and say, or somebody was to come to you and say, I want to launch a fintech in the UK, or I'm looking for somewhere to launch a fintech, what would be your pros, cons on somebody's going to start something new, and what would you say to them? And somebody's already sort of 6 months into being somewhere else, 12 months in, 18 months in, it's got a bit of a user base, thinking about the UK or somewhere else. What's that conversation go like?
If I'm honest, I don't think Brexit is in the top 3 things that I would talk to them about. I think it's still, what's your product? How saturated is this market? What's the fastest route to customer acquisition? You look at a lot of fintechs at the moment across many of the different sort of silos within the financial services industry, and a lot of them that have been born in London or born in the UK are still in the UK, so they haven't actually expanded overseas anyway. So it's still, from a regulatory perspective, as I said before, it's still the place to get regulated. That's awful English, but you get what I mean. So I think there's still 3-4 more important, I think, factors or indicators in terms of where you settle than Brexit. Principally because I don't see a lot changing in the next 2-3 years. I think that the process of getting to those granular level details is going to take that time, and until those, the one thing that I think will scare people is talent leaving the UK. I think that's the number one. So at the moment, and I read a stat, I think 61% or the fintech industry has bred 61% of all technology or technological recruitment positions over the last years, or Robert Walters.
Wow.
Which is absolutely insane. And if you think about that industry may be impacted because it's people's knee-jerk reaction, as it was when Brexit was beginning to be discussed, which is about people leaving or people coming to the UK. That might turn people off. But again, until that's law, or until something's actually been decided on that, it's very difficult to hedge.
Same question to you. What would you say if sort of Fintech 123 comes to you and says, I'm thinking of launching in the UK, should you do it? Should you think of somewhere else first?
Well, I mean, it's near the exact same thing that you're saying. I mean, the number one thing, what is the product? And the great thing about, fintechs, first and foremost, is innovative products that, that have been started by one person or two people. And, growing to scale, like, with 100, 200 employees straight away. That shouldn't be the thing. So, in fact, it shouldn't matter too much about Brexit right now. There is uncertainty. There's obviously like issues over investment and things like that. But I would actually say for the same thing over the next 2-3 years, because even if there's Brexit tomorrow, there's still going to be transition period. It's totally still, London's still a great, amazing place to get regulated, get growth. And also a lot of the VCs here, they don't think, okay, so you're London-based or Paris-based. The first and foremost thing is, what is your idea? What is your strategy, your plan? How do you get to customer acquisition? That's what they care about. They don't care if you're doing it in a garage in Bromley or you're sitting maybe in Paris and come over here. They want to know that first. And there's not going
Product
to be...
Product and team, isn't it? It's those two things.
Absolutely. And so I would actually say, just to really hone that in, and actually a lot of the VCs that are looking to fund those things, that's what they're looking at. They don't care that you're coming from London or you're in London.
It's interesting that San Francisco continues to be a powerhouse of technology and continues to produce new technology companies because it's got that VC community with the sort of the DNA of creating tech companies. You could argue that London has investors now with the DNA of creating fintechs. So as an ecosystem, it could continue to do that, but will the freight train sort of lose that momentum? We don't know. But there's an interesting question. So David actually, bless him, here he is.
Get the mask.
David put out a tweet and he ran a poll where would be the post-Brexit office for 11FS? So where would yours be, Adam?
Oh man!
I read that as Brexit post office when it first came out. I was like, oh no.
Where would I like us to open up an office? I mean, purely for selfish reasons, Amsterdam.
Yeah, you went for Amsterdam.
That's a good place.
Where would you want an office if it couldn't be in London?
I don't know. Berlin. I do love Berlin.
Berlin's cool.
I do really love Berlin. I think that would be my number one.
So interestingly, both Amsterdam and Berlin were on the poll, so there were 4 options. It was Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris or Barcelona. In last place was Berlin, funnily enough, which interestingly is a bit of a startup hub in its own right. People are multilingual there, property's cheap, really great city to live. In 3rd place was Paris. The French government's been spending a lot of time and energy making startups a thing, but obviously there's a question about is it still quite bureaucratic? We don't know. Barcelona was in 2nd.
It's got a beach.
I was just about to say, like, imagine.
But in 1st place was Amsterdam. And the one thing that I always notice is, well, Money 2020 is going to be in Amsterdam, of course. A lot of financial services companies based there, large professional services. They have a port. And of course, very high percentage of English speaking.
Yeah, culturally incredibly aligned to us. From here, 45 minutes or so, if that, on the plane.
And I think also, once you get off the plane at Schiphol, the ability to get from Schiphol into Amsterdam compared to getting from Heathrow into London is night and day. So that's it. So if uncertainty is the problem, what would you do about that uncertainty? If you're a fintech, would you just keep ploughing forward, or are you putting plans in? What can you realistically do?
Well, I suppose it depends at what point in the scale you're at, right? So, I mean, if you're a lot more established, and obviously you're whether you're a unicorn, that's what you're hoping to be, and you're in the middle range of that. Excuse me, everyone. I suppose, I mean, the natural thing is to find a subsidy, is to set up an office somewhere else. I mean, that's what I would do immediately, even if it's like one person sitting there in a little cupboard office, setting up that subsidy, because you need to hedge your bets. You need to be able to like always have in anything an exit door. A fire exit basically. And so if something just crazy happened, and this is the thing, we don't know, if something just completely out of the blue, they're like, okay, this is all stopping, this is not gonna work, that you have a base that has already been all approved, you're all ready to go and go, like, even if you're just like 5 people, 10 people, be like, okay, the option's there, we're just gonna move our HQ there, we can continue doing our business, we're gonna service all our clients from there, we can keep building there. That would be
build a little
the
colony.
the most prudent thing that you could do.
I think that's interesting. Interesting. We have seen a few organisations, and I guess some of the big banks look to do a little bit of that. And Adam, like a number of our clients, from our own perspective, we're talking to clients, as a UK-based company that works largely with financial services. We obviously have a good chunk of clients from here in London, but we have clients across Europe, across South Africa, across Asia Pacific, into the US. So depends on the nature of your business, I guess.
I think so. I think if you're a fintech right now, also a lot of decisions you take, I suppose, if you are geography agnostic, I think a lot of it will hinge on the investment and your investment partners and maybe some of their stipulations in terms of how you set up. But I think that aside, if you're kind of already on that way, you're into alpha territory, into beta territory, you're not going to slow that down just because if there's no real need to. And I think again, as we've talked about already, some of the factors that make UK very appealing around customer acquisition and regulatory frameworks and all that sort of stuff, that's not going to go away overnight. So I think the only thing you might have one eye on is scalability abroad. How is it going to work? But again, a lot of what we do is incredibly service based. So you're not actually sort of shipping unless you're going to throw the cards over the fence, you're not shipping a physical product over. So there's connotations around that, which means it might be, I suppose, from a penalty perspective, less difficult, if you like, to expand your services to other places in the EU. But I think for me, it's more around where you are as a company, what are you looking to achieve, and as I say, how quickly you can potentially therefore expand your services, and then you might have an issue.
What I'm taking from this is it seems like you can still be very much in control of your own destiny as a company. There's still a lot of assets that you can benefit from that are based here in the UK, but actually building a colony and having that hedge and that sort of exit strategy should you need it is probably just good business sense at the best of times anyway. Anything else you want to leave our viewers with before we call this one to a close? Any passing shots?
Oh wow, well, it's gone so quickly, but well, I suppose like the biggest thing is that at the end of the day, with all this uncertainty, with the fact that we don't know what's going to happen even over the next 3 years, is the number one thing, especially in fintech community, is that you number one have to put your product first and foremost. The race to customer acquisition. What is your structure? And also have hedge your bets. Do the proper kind of, I suppose, like risk management planning, i.e. set up that little subsidiary somewhere.
In Amsterdam, clearly, that's what people have voted for.
Imagine the amazing launch parties for subsidiaries as well. That's a bonus, right?
Well, yes, that's it. You got to get that.
You guys organise that kind of thing for your clients?
It can be arranged for the right client at the right time. We're pretty good at throwing a party, that's for sure. Alrighty, Lianna, where can people find out more about you?
So if you go to uk.finance.yahoo.com, so that's Yahoo Finance UK, or you can find me at Twitter at Lianna Brindad.
Thank you very much. How about your good self, Adam?
Well, you kind of already found us via Davies' Twitter profile. So obviously 11fs.com and AdamD8 on Twitter, at AdamD8, I should say.
That's a nice short Twitter handle.
I got in there quick.
There's a new service, I'm going to get in there. Hey, listen, you can find me at SYTaylor on Twitter. You can email me directly, simon@11fs.com. And I just want to thank you for tuning in. If you want more insight like this, don't want to see my face because there's a ginger beard and it's all quite horrific, let's just make it easier for you. Why not listen to our FinTech Insider podcast? It's available on all your favourite podcast providers, of course. And we started a question segment on the podcast. So if you have any questions, email me, simon@11fs.com. Or if you don't want to get through to me and you want to talk to producer Petra, who's sitting behind there, then podcasts@11fs.com can do that. Last but not least, of course, if there's a topic you want to see on air, easy for me to say, hit us up on those emails or just tweet us at FinTech Insiders. We'll have more for you next week. Bye-bye. Now we do the shuffling thing that newsreaders do.